Thank you, Glenda. Okay, we're ready. Yeah, one of the things that has been really successful for me in helping my clients over the years is this concept that in every human interaction, one person is training another how to behave. And the question I always ask my clients after I make them aware of this is, do you want to be the trainer or the trainee? And I bet you won't be surprised to hear that I have yet to find a person that wants to be the trainee. Everybody wants to be the trainer. And so let's take a look at that. And I'm going to do this more in a little workshop type environment rather than just me presenting, because I want you to have a little time to think about each of these various situations and think about where you're training and where you're being trained. So let's look first at our customers. And I'd like you to take 30 seconds to think about, how are you training them? How are you training them? Karen Fox and I have the good fortune to be in a mastermind group with Karen. She and I had a similar experience, different time frames, but we had come out with new offerings and we had a process for providing that offering in a way that was going to be very effective. And then we met prospects who'd say, you know, I don't want that whole package. I just want A and C. You know, I don't want the whole thing. And initially, we both, in an attempt to accommodate our customers, went along with that, only to quickly discover they weren't getting the results that they should have been getting because they weren't taking advantage of the whole process. They weren't incorporating the whole process. So we went from being trained by our customers to alter the way we were doing things to becoming the trainers, because after that, we said to them, no, that doesn't work, and I'm not going to contribute to a failure. It will fail if you try to go that route. And some people said, okay, great, and they'd buy the whole package, and others would say, no, I don't want all of that, and that's fine too. But that's just one instance of how we can be training or be trained by our customers. So as you were thinking about that, is anybody willing to share something that they train their customers to do? Something in particular that you found, Bill?
Dale, you and I have talked about this before, but I think asking good questions, getting customers to ask good questions rather than talking too much.
Okay, so one of the ways it's helpful, and you do a lot of sales training, is getting them to learn to ask questions, and in essence, teach their customers to become accustomed to, and prospects to become accustomed to answering those questions. And Bill Thompson and I were talking a little bit earlier about his business, and he was talking about the series of questions he used to identify whether or not somebody was a price buyer or whether they really valued all of the things he was talking about a moment ago. Because it's essential to his success and theirs to be able to understand that and know when you can be of service and when you can't. Mark?
We like to train our customers when they're buying a new item or specialty item like furniture to call us so we can help them find the best option so they don't go somewhere else.
Okay, so getting them to understand that in order to provide the best solution for them, you need to meet and you need to see what their environment is. Okay, very good. So those are some examples of how we can train our customers. And there's an example of how not to be trained by your customers in that process, okay? Any other questions or any other thoughts? We can apply the same thing to competitors. Thad, I couldn't have asked for a better lead-in. I had no idea that's what you were going to do. But how are your competitors training you, and how are you training them? Think about that for a little bit. How are you training them? I mean, Thad is obviously training his competitors by the way that he does business. A lot of them apparently are not paying attention, but he's training them on marketing and things that would be more effective for the business if they were simply paying attention. but he's also not allowing them to train him on the price issue. He's very clear about having a premium price and why the value is there. And it's okay with him when he's talking to a prospect. If price is the key element, then it's just not a good fit. So he's training his competitors and prospective customers on the price element. I also happen to know that Thad's one of the most innovative balloon designers and creators that there is, and that's one of the ways he stays ahead of his competition, and he's raising the bar for competitors. On the negative side of this, you know, years ago I was amazed when Walmart went into the grocery business because they were already struggling to maintain margins, and grocery is an even lower margin business. And when you consider the amount of investment that needs to be made in infrastructure in order to handle that type of business, it's just phenomenal. But I was even more astounded when I found out Target followed their lead, right? So again, are we making decisions in light of what our competitors are doing without understanding the implications? Are we doing it out of fear? Is it a knee-jerk emotional reaction? Or are we making conscious evaluations and analysis of whether or not this is a good extension of our business, one that's going to help us improve our margins rather than make them more difficult to achieve? Are they complementary, or are they so far afield that it's going to be a struggle for us to be effective in providing that? Are we going to confuse the market with that approach? Any questions or thoughts on that? Anything you'd like to share about how your competitors? Yes. Yeah.
For instance, I'm just into interior design business. I've been in residential and I've been in commercial. But as I look at the market and seeing more and more of the baby boomers, so I decided to specialize not only in residential or in commercial, but for the needs of people who are aging. And that trying to make buildings, trying to make housing, trying to make renovation specialized for the needs of people who, you know, are aging, and that their needs are individualized themselves. Like some people need ramps, some people need.
So initially you may have used a broader approach on your interior design business in terms of the market you served, but you found this growing need in the baby boomer market for different types of assistance in daily living and that sort of thing, and now you've created a niche out of that. And I don't imagine you have many competitors at this point, do you?
No, not really. We all were trained, but everybody, all my competitors are afraid, no, I don't do that, you know. I'd rather renovate and, you know, collect money instead of, you know, really helping and servicing the client.
Very good, very good. All right, we can extend this to vendors that we use. How are we training them and how are they training us? Ned?
You mentioned Walmart. There's nobody in business better at training the vendors than Walmart. You want to play in Walmart's backyard, I don't care what you're selling.
Yeah, you're going to play by Walmart's rules, right? So.
They don't get trained by their vendors.
Right, yeah.
But you know, to the point of training customers, the reason that Walmart brought in grocery was because you go to the same people go to the grocery store 2 or 3 times a week, and they train their customers to come to Walmart to get everything
They need, right, yeah.
Whereas just to come for a hard good or that from time to time.
Yeah, no, it does increase, or can increase the frequency of visits by Walmart customers. Yeah, I get that, yeah. Rick?
So the vendors are always a good resource for what your competition is doing. So you have to, I think in some ways you have to guard some things with your vendors, but you have to build relationships with them, because if they're selling you a product, they're selling your competitors that product too.
Okay.
So it's good, I've found it's been good to kind of get a feel for, after I build a relationship and maybe meet with them for a beer or something, what's going on over at so-and-so, and they'll share that.
Okay, so you, in essence, then, with your relationships with vendors, train them to be a resource for you, and you learned which, as Thad pointed out earlier, which to trust and which not to, which ones that you could share information with and know they were going to reciprocate in a way that would allow you to develop a bigger pie for both of you, and which ones wouldn't work in that regard. So that's a great way to train it. Yes, Mary?
When I'm working with a vendor, I will let them know not to inundate me with options.
Okay.
Many times they want to be creative, they want to have a lot of solutions to choose from, but if they share too much with me, I'll shut down and I won't choose anything.
Okay.
It'll just be overwhelming.
So you teach vendors not to offer you tons of options. You know, 2 or 3 probably is fine, but don't overwhelm me with them, because
Yeah, they need to ask the questions first to get closer to what
you're looking for.
But then, instead of just throwing everything we know, it needs to be more targeted.
Okay, so you're teaching them to ask questions to determine what it is that you're really looking for before offering the options. Wonderful, yeah. You know, some of this is, are you tolerating less than the service expectation that you had? Are you encouraging them to continue bad practices, things that aren't to your advantage, because you're not willing to speak up and say, hey, that's just not acceptable. You can't do that. I remember years ago when I was in corporate, and I had to order some computer checks in the days when we printed checks on computers. But anyway, I remember calling the vendor I'd been using for years, and we had a good relationship, and he quoted me a price, and then after I got the price, it seemed a little high, and I realized I hadn't shopped him in a while, so I called another vendor who came in, offered all the same services, and was $1,000 less, including the new setup charges. So I gave it to the new vendor. A couple weeks later, I get a call from the old vendor saying, hey, what happened with this order? And I said, well, I had somebody else come in, gave me a price, and it was better than yours, and I went with them. And he said to me, well, Dale, given the length of our relationship and the nature of our relationship, I would have thought that you would have given me a better price, or a chance to match the price. And I said, gee, that's interesting, because I assumed, given our long-term relationship, that you had given me your best price. His next question was, can I bid the next time? I said, absolutely. But I'm training him that that's not acceptable. When I was with Whitaker Homes, we would have 45, 50 different levels of construction, components of the construction of a home. So all of those are different subcontractors. And because I wasn't able to monitor everybody all the time, every month I'd pick 3 invoices at random from different vendors, and I'd call them and tell them the invoice didn't look right. Now, I didn't know whether it was or not. I just called them and tell them it didn't look right. And they would come back and say, well, Dale, that's exactly what we bid. I say, oh, I must have been looking at an old bid or something, But for a few weeks after that, I would get phone calls for every unusual item that came up and said, oh, by the way, this one's going to be a little higher because. So what I was training them was to pay attention to what they're doing and not try to take advantage in some regard, because they were under the impression that I was really monitoring more closely than I was able to do. Yes, Josh?
So my dad one time he's a great salesman, but lost a piece of business, and the guy said, I don't want you to take it personally, but because it was personal, we give you the business. And my dad said, well, how do we make this personal?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, very good, very good. Yes, Bill?
A key component, if you're in a bidding process, is to initially get permission to change the spec. Because unless you get permission to change the spec,
Right,
then that customer can be heading down that commodity road for a price.
right. Yeah, so if you,
Bid it as is, that's what it's gonna end up being.
right. So, good point, Bill. Don't really bid anything unless you have the ability to change the specs so that you have some advantage in some way. And I'm sorry, but I've run out of time here. But you can do the same thing with employees. Are you training them to be creative, independent, solution-oriented, or are you teaching them to be a robot, in the process? And then it extends into family and friends. In our dealings with family and friends, how are they training us and how are we training them? Okay? With that, I'll leave that with you to think about during the rest of the day.
Got 5 minutes for questions.
5 minutes for questions and answers, so. Ned,
So at Missouri Venture Forum, we have a program called Flip.
we'll wait for the microphone, so.
Pretty loud. At Missouri Venture Forum, we offer a program called Fast Pitch, which used to be called 2-Minute Forum, you might remember. And at that, we work with young entrepreneurs to help them understand how to present and what it is that they do clearly. And one of the things we always have them start with is, what is the problem that you solve that your client will viscerally respond to with, oh my God, if you can solve that problem, here is all my money.
Right, right.
And when you lead with that, you've couched the rest of your presentation in terms of you training your customer.
Yes.
As opposed to if you just start with, my name is, and blah, 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 blah. So that's been pretty effective for our folks, and just a little piece of information.
No, it is very effective, and I've done a lot of work with taglines over the years, and it's been that same process. So many people either want to say what they do, I'm a videographer, I'm an HR consultant, whatever, or they want to describe a process. They don't talk about that result, and the result is what the customer's buying. That's what's really important to them. Other questions or comments? Bill?
We train people in here to wait for them.
Yeah.
Dale, how do you know? How do you know who's training who?
How do you know who's training who?
Yeah, how do you know?
If you're doing things that you don't want to do, that don't fit your values, then you're being trained. But if you're training people to work in accordance with your values and your approach, then you're being the trainer. And that means that you have to understand when there's alignment and when there isn't, okay? And I see Thad shaking his head because we've had this conversation before. It's all right if somebody doesn't want to do all 5 elements of my pricing program. I'm completely fine with that. If that's not what they want, this isn't the right thing for them. But I'm training them that unless they're willing to invest in all 5 elements, I'm not going to be a party to it, okay? And it's fine that we reach an agreement that this isn't the right fit. That's perfectly fine. But I'm not going to sacrifice what I know is going to be effective, especially after I learned the lesson with a client who didn't get the success they should have gotten because they didn't do all 5 elements. Bill?
Dale, as to the those deals that don't work out, sometimes I find it helpful to remember that every trainer is also a learner.
Absolutely.
If they're going to be effective as a trainer.
Absolutely.
Because in each one of those, whether they work out or whether they don't work out, there's the opportunity to learn something, adjust the trim tabs, tailor the presentation, do something different the next time.
Yeah, absolutely, and that particularly applies to customers. Just Monday, I was on the phone with a friend of mine in New York, and she was telling me about a program she had done at Queens College, and afterwards, a dozen of the students in that class contacted her later, wanting to make a personal connection and learn more, and I asked her, I said, well, when are you starting your group classes? And she said, what do you mean? I said, you've got a dozen people that took time out to contact you personally because they found so much value in what you were saying, why are you not providing them with more in the form of classes or coaching or whatever? Because they're telling you this is what we want. The market was trying to train her, but she wasn't aware that that was the message that was being sent. Okay? So we have to be both trainer and trainee, absolutely. Other questions or comments? Thank you all very much.